All right, and these videos are going to look how taxes work. Okay, so the taxes are quite a hot topic with a lot of people. Feel very strongly about taxes. And in this first video, we're just going to look at how it works basically, and then we're going to talk about who pays. Okay, so first of all, let's just draw a normal supply and demand. And we're going to look at taxes on a product. So for example, this could be like a tax you pay when you buy something, like a sales tax or something like that. Okay. I'm not going to make a specific product at this point. Later on, we'll give some examples of specific products. So just go ahead and draw supply and demand, kind of in a neutral way. So yeah, right now we're not really too worried about the detail of this. Okay, so supply and demand, and we have our quantity if this was in equilibrium, and we have our price if this is equilibrium. Okay. So now we're going to go ahead and put a tax in this market. And let's suppose, so we're going to put a tax, a unit tax, and we're going to, this unit tax is going to be equal to big T. Now you could think of big T as being some amount. Okay, so you could think of this as being like $1 a unit or 50 cents a unit or something like that. Okay, it doesn't really matter for our purposes because we're just trying to kind of show how this works. Okay, so and let's suppose this is on the seller. Okay, so what that means is that the seller is going to have to pay this. So every time they sell a unit, then they're going to have to give some money to the government, right? And so for simplicity, you can just think of this as being $1, although it could be any amount. It doesn't really matter for this purpose. Okay, so what that means is, well, the supply line showed how much the company wanted to receive before, and so now they have to pay this extra tax. So in order to receive the same amount as they were getting before, they're going to have to charge the customer more, right? So this height here is just the tax. This is the unit tax. And that's going to have the same thing. You could adjust their whole supply curve. So the supply curve shows their willingness to sell. And now they're only willing to sell if you cover their marginal cost and you also pay for the tax. Okay, so that's basically how this thing works. So we can make a new supply line, and this new supply line is the supply line plus the unit tax. Okay, so that's what we end up with. And so this supply line, you can think of it as like the new decision line. This is their decision, the decision line. And, sorry about the pen. It's doing some, it's kind of leaving a trail right now. I'm not really sure what's going on. Okay, so then we come down to here and we say, okay, well, this new decision line, they're gonna only willing to sell if they can charge a higher price. And so we're going to see, well, what happens when they do this? Okay, so this point right here, where this decision line intersects with demand, is going to be the new equilibrium, right? So, and then, so this will be our new quantity, and this is how much the buyers are going to have to pay. So this I'm going to call it PB. So PB paid, okay? And then this part in here, I'll make it this green part. This height, okay, this is T. This is the tax, and this goes to the government. Okay, so actually, they're only going to receive PS. So PS is the price paid by the buyers minus the tax, right? And this is received by the sellers. So even though the buyers pay all the way up at PB, the sellers only receive this PS. And then the middle part, and this one can be called the tax wedge. This middle part goes to the government. Okay, so that's the idea here. So we can go ahead and finish this thing real quick, and then we'll come back to this in a little while. So let's see what happened to this thing. So let's label some areas. Well, the buyer is paying PB. So remember, to find consumer surplus, we go, well, below the demand curve and above the price. So they pay PB. So this is their surplus up here, just this triangle. And then the producer is receiving this PS. And their costs, well, we don't consider the tax, just their own costs, are represented by the original supply line. So this is their producer surplus. And notice these are both a lot smaller than they would before. And then this part in between is the tax. This part in between. So the tax is here. This box. So 1 unit. So the tax is equal to T times this quantity with the tax. Okay? And so we see this tax as taking a big wedge in the middle. Now, we'll come back to this in a little more detail in the next slide. In the next video. But one of the questions that people ask is who pays the tax? Okay, so who pays the tax? Well, we said this tax is on the sellers, but actually we're going to find out that both sides will pay the tax. Okay, so who pays the tax? And it's actually the answer is both. Both of them are going to pay the tax. So let's see that. So how do we see? Well, the buyers pay more. Okay, so the price for buyers is greater than it was before. Before it was P star. So they pay more, right? So the buyers are paying more than before. So they pay some tax. And the price for the sellers receive is less than they were receiving before. All right, so they receive less money. So the sellers receive less money. So actually, they both pay the tax. So in almost all situations, when you put a tax on the market, it will actually affect both the buyers and the sellers, not just one side. Okay, so I just kind of got rid of some of the stuff off our graph and made it look a little different. So the last thing I want to do in this video is to say, well, what if you put the tax on the sellers? Okay, so before it was sort of like the idea of, on the buyers. Before it was sort of the idea, well, when the sellers receive the money, then they have to give some of the money to the government as tax, and it's per unit, so it's actually like a sales tax. But then here we're saying, well, what if we change it and instead we put the tax on the buyers? So like at the time that you're buying the thing, the seller tells you that'll be $5, and then you have to, on top of that, add whatever tax there is, right? So it's not included in sort of the quoted price, so to speak. So in this case, it's going to go on the buyers, and this will say, well, it's going to change the demand curve. So the demand curve is going to go down. So what's that going to be? It's going to go down. It's going to go down by T. Okay. The reason it goes down is because if you pay this price, like let's say you pay $6 before, you're willing to buy this money at $6, you don't care who the money is going to. You're not saying, oh, okay, I'll pay it since it's going to the government. No, people, that's not the way we think people are thinking about this. So people just care about what do they actually pay for something. And in this case, since the tax, so your willingness to pay hasn't changed. But after you consider the tax, then the amount you're willing to give the company is less, right? So before you're willing to give them $6, and you're still willing to give $6, but that includes the tax. And so if it was like a $1 per unit tax, then you would only be willing to give the company $5 because you know you have to pay this other part. Okay, so then we end up with it looking like this, with this being the new decision line for tax. Demand minus the tax. And notice something. These two end up being exactly the same. So here and here is exactly the same. So the price for the buyer and the price for the seller is the same. So actually it doesn't matter who you put the tax on. And the reason why it doesn't matter is because this distance from here to here is the same. So it doesn't matter whether you're shifting the supply up or you're shifting the demand down. This is still equal to T. Right, the tax wedge.